Vinegar is one of the most misunderstood tools in natural gardening. It can strengthen your plants and unlock nutrients in your soil, or it could kill your garden if you get it wrong. So in this video, I'm going to show you how you can make a high quality vinegar and how to use it so you can get the benefits without the damage. And the best part about this technique that I'm going to show you is that you can use pretty much anything to make your own high quality vinegar, any fruit that is, in as little as 2.5 weeks. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Taylor and I help gardeners explore sustainable and regenerative growing techniques that help us all become less reliant on the system, or more specifically, the unsustainable and degenerative practices that show up in a lot of modern gardening ideologies, at least. I'm going to show you the vinegar recipe that I use, but if you want to download an easy to read version of this recipe, you can print it out for free. You can hit the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen to get access to it. What is vinegar and why is it so potentially useful for growing healthy plants while also being potentially harmful? Interestingly, there's evidence of vinegar making in ancient cultures stretching back to 5,000 years ago and probably even further. It's thought to have been used for a variety of purposes. It was a form of medicine in ancient cultures, it was a cooking ingredient, and it had helpful uses in food preservation, and it's likely that it was used as a cleaning agent. And while it's hard to know for sure, many think that it is likely that ancient people used vinegar in their agricultural practices from the beginning. More recently, Han Kyu Cho developed the Korean natural farming framework that relies on brown rice vinegar, a traditional Korean vinegar, to perform a number of functions, all of which we will get to in this video. But as far as making vinegar, it's honestly not as complicated as a process as you might think. Essentially, we're going to perform a two-stage fermentation process. The first stage where we convert sugar into alcohol, and a second stage where we convert the alcohol into acetic acid or vinegar. And I was going to demonstrate this with a few different types of ingredients so that I could highlight different options, but I didn't have the chance to get all of the stuff that I needed, and I wanted to make this video so that you could all get started. Right now, we're releasing this video toward the end of fall, starting to approach winter, which is a great time to do it. So I'm just going to show you how to make a simple apple cider vinegar, and you can replicate this with pretty much any fruit that you have, to my knowledge. Of course, there may be some exceptions there, but generally speaking, this will work with any sweet fruit or berry. So here's our ingredient, the humble apple. This is going to make a classic vinegar known as, you guessed it, apple cider vinegar. Apples contain just about the right amount of sugar to properly ferment all on their own. When we mash this up, we break that protective seal of the skin, and the natural yeasts and bacteria on the outside of the apple start feeding on the sugars found inside the apple. Now, ordinarily, you would use a cider press or a juicer or maybe something to liquefy your apples. But if you're like me and you don't have one, you can use this simple trick to skip the line. You just need a freezer and a blender. So pop your apples in the freezer overnight. They're going to freeze solid, and then thaw them out the next day. And what do you know? Grody apples. But the good news is these blend beautifully. And believe it or not, for making apple cider vinegar, that is literally all you need. That's technically the only ingredient that's required. There are additional things that you could add to speed up the process, which we'll get into in a little bit, but this would work to make vinegar all on its own. You could also just buy a no sugar added apple cider, totally up to you how you want to do it. If you grow apples, or if you know someone who grows apples, you can take the bruised ones and use those. They don't have to be spiffy clean if you're using them in your garden. Up to you, but that's gonna make apple cider vinegar. So after mashing this up, peels and all, we are going to put this in our fermentation vessel, which in this case is a 1/2 gallon glass jar. You could use a food grade plastic container or a bucket if you're making a lot of it, up to you. You just don't wanna use cheap plastic or metal other than stainless steel, because that is going to react with the alcohol and the acidity coming from the vinegar, and the plastics can leach when that happens, and metal will react and corrode and rust and contaminate your vinegar. Ceramic, glass, food grade plastic, stainless steel, those are pretty much your options. And if you have a large ceramic crock or a high quality stainless steel brewing vessel that you don't need for a while, I'd say that those are going to be really solid options, because you need to keep your vinegar out of direct sunlight. So for my glass jar, I'm just going to put this up in the cupboard above the stove. It's a warm spot and out of direct sunlight, and then every day for the next week to 10 days, I'm going to stir it and make sure that the natural yeasts are getting properly established. Now, if you want to, you can add a commercial yeast or a champagne yeast strain or something to increase the alcohol content and make sure that the culture sets, I prefer to just let the natural yeasts do their thing. But if you're using store-bought juice that's pasteurized, that could really help the process start, since it won't have the natural yeasts from the peel. And what's gonna happen here is that as they get established, they're gonna feed on the sugars in the apple, the yeasts, and poop out carbon dioxide, just like any ferment. If colorful mold appears on the surface of this, we gotta toss it because it's a sign that contamination has occurred and it's best to just start over. That's why we're gonna stir it to make sure that all of the mash is getting evenly fermented and to release a bit of the built up carbon dioxide. You can also do a little taste test each day as the process begins to get a sense of how the fermentation is going. You'll notice that over time it becomes less and less sweet and more cider-like and a little bit alcoholic. And then once it's reached its maturity, it should taste minimally sweet and fairly alcoholic. So at this point, you're gonna go ahead and strain out all of the solids and reserve the liquid, and then you're ready to begin stage 2, which is converting the ethanol into acetic acid or the alcohol into vinegar. And here's the crazy thing, with a little aeration and a good whisk to get things started, this process will happen all on its own. The main things that you need here are a decent surface area within your fermentation vessel, and in the first few days, a good vigorous whisking. You want to aerate the cider and allow it to be exposed to oxygen because acetic acid bacteria requires oxygen to multiply. And I should say at this point that for both fermentation stages, you can either seal the fermentation container or you can cover it with a breathable lid. The only thing is if you seal it up tight, you need to either have an airlock that allows gas to escape, or you need to burp it every day because the carbon dioxide will build up. And if you did nothing else, you just let the natural acetic acid bacteria that are already present in very small amounts to convert the ethanol into acetic acid, you would have vinegar in 3 to 4 months. However, if you are impatient like me and want some results way sooner, we've got options. First, and probably the easiest option that I would recommend for everyone, is to do this simple step called backslopping. And despite having a slightly bizarre name, the term backslopping refers to the process of introducing a microbial strain from a previous batch. So if you have a raw vinegar on hand, or you know where you can get one, you can go ahead and add a good old slop of that into your cider. I'd recommend adding at least a cup's worth per gallon of vinegar. Here for this container, I've got around 1/3 of a gallon, so I should be adding about 1/3 of a cup once it's ready for that is. And just doing this is gonna speed up the process dramatically. Hard to say exact numbers, but a lot of people would probably say that this is gonna reduce your acetic acid fermentation conversion process by 50%. So if it was about to take 4 months, you could hypothetically get finished vinegar in 2. Not bad for such a simple addition. Now, if you want to take this one step further, you can bring in a special piece of equipment, a fish tank bubbler. And what this is going to do, as may be immediately obvious, is that it's going to aerate the cider. The reason this is such a good upgrade is because of what I said about acetic acid bacteria needing oxygen. If you can keep this brew continuously aerated, the acetic acid bacteria is going to have a much easier time converting the ethanol into acetic acid. And by keeping my ciders continuously aerated, I've been able to reduce the secondary fermentation stage down to 1 week, which is pretty insane, especially considering without doing these 2 things, it takes like 3 months on the lower end. To do this effectively, there's sort of a balancing act. The dilemma here is that you have to keep a breathable lid on, such as a kitchen towel and a rubber band, or a piece of string. And you're going to run the tube underneath the rubber band and the towel to make sure that airstone sits at the bottom of the container, because you want the whole batch to get aerated evenly. The trick here is that you need to keep it sealed and closed off, because vinegar flies are going to be attracted to this and they will find it wherever you put it. But you can't have the seal so tight that it cuts airflow through the tube. So that's the balance that you kind of want to strike. Plug this in, keep it plugged in, and keep your vinegar out of direct sunlight, and it should be ready in 1 to 2 weeks. I recommend taste testing this after the first few days just to get a sense of how it's progressing. You'll taste the cider become less and less alcoholic and the vinegar more and more prominent. And your sense of taste is going to be the best to judge for when it's ready. You don't want to stop the second ferment until all of the alcohol flavor is gone and it tastes nice and sour like vinegar. Now this stuff probably will taste a little bit more muted in flavor than your regular store-bought industrial scale produced vinegar, but that's also what's going to make this stuff perfect for the garden. If you want to check the exact acidity with a pH test strip, you totally can. You're just looking for anything below 3.5 or maybe even 3 on the pH scale. Now, if all that made sense and you're ready to make your own vinegar, that's great, and I'm glad I could help. But if you're still wondering exactly how this is going to be of use to you in the garden, that's what this next part is going to cover. But before we get into that, it is time to introduce this video's sponsor, the Natural Gardening Group. And this is a group that I am just starting to get off the ground as we've made more and more YouTube videos and been able to reach more and more people like you. It has occurred to me that I'm missing a piece of the puzzle. I love getting to educate, but I also love getting to collaborate and work with people. And this is the opportunity for me to get to do that, to connect with you. If you are learning about natural gardening or Korean natural farming, or any of the other things that we cover on this channel and you love it but aren't sure exactly how to get started, the Natural Gardening Group is for you. There is an endless amount of information on the internet, and if you want to, you can find it and implement it. But what I've come to realize is that information only really takes you so far so fast. When I was learning about all these techniques, I pretty much had to just figure it out how to do it and implement it on my own. And that meant that it took me a while, and it kind of felt pretty lonely, which is why I'm making the Natural Gardening Group the educational community that I wish that I had. Making gardening inputs is one thing, implementing them in a way that leads to lasting change is another. If you've got a project that you're working on, a goal or a dream to restore your garden to its fullest potential using any of the techniques that we talk about on this channel, I would love to connect with you in the Natural Gardening Group. You can try out a free trial by scanning the QR code on the screen or by hitting the link in the description to get started. And with that, why would I use vinegar in my garden? If you Google that question, the first 2 reasons the AI summary gives you are to kill weeds and to deter pests. It goes on to say that you can use it to improve soil acidity and control fungal diseases like powdery mildew. Only thing is that you gotta use it cautiously, as its acidity can harm desired plants and temporarily alter soil pH. Wise words from Google. Now, if you're appropriately sketched out by Roundup, but you still want to get those pesky weeds out without pulling them by hand, you may have been told that vinegar is a good low-risk alternative to the harsh and dangerous chemicals found in commercial herbicides. But that is not the reason that we are looking at vinegar today. It's also not primarily so that we can deter pests, although you can use it for that if you'd like. Believe it or not, we are going to be spraying this directly on our plants, the ones that we want to grow. And this is where Google gets it kind of right. Vinegar is a great natural cleanser of fungal disease. The acidity, similar to something like lactic acid bacteria, which is another Korean natural farming input, is going to help crowd out the surface of the plant leaves where fungal and bacterial diseases can emerge. The pathogens really don't do well in these acidic conditions, and so vinegar can be a great way to manage those. But it also does a whole lot more. And I'll clarify right now before we go any further and say that we are never going to be applying vinegar to our plants at a dilution rate more concentrated than 1 to 500. And that's a very small amount, about 1.5 tablespoons in a gallon of water, or 2 milliliters of vinegar in a liter of water, for my metric folks out there. So as far as crowding out the space on our plants and also in the soil, vinegar, as we've been talking about, contains a good amount of live acetic acid bacteria. And one way that I like to think about this is when it comes to vinegar is in the context of our other Korean natural farming inputs. Lactic acid bacteria, oriental herbal nutrient, and vinegar are all sort of playing a role in crowding out bad bacteria and fungi in the garden. And they all achieve that in slightly different ways, but they're all working together. Now, you can use vinegar on its own, fully diluted of course, but I'd recommend combining it with the other natural farming inputs if you've got them, because they work in tandem. Another thing the vinegar does for our plants is that when applied at large amounts, it's gonna cause a major stress response and likely dehydrate them. But at these smaller amounts, diluted 1 to 500, it provides more of a gentle nudge, and that nudge stimulates a minor stress response, one that's just enough to really get the plant to snap into defense mode and protect itself. So by applying vinegar at these low doses, we're actually encouraging the plant to defend itself from pathogens and pests. And it does this by generating a mild wax coating on its leaves, its stem, and fruit. And it also does this by communicating with and signaling for help to the beneficial microorganisms in the soil. Just like all of the natural farming inputs, we're stimulating what I like to call biomimicking responses. That's not a term that I invented, by the way. I just like it because the whole goal is to coax our plants into doing what they already have in them to do, just at a faster and maybe a little bit more effective pace and quality. With proper microbial populations in the soil, we can rest assured that our soil pH is not going to get thrown out of whack by applying vinegar, especially at these low doses. In fact, our soil microbiomes will likely respond in similar ways, helping to clear out pathogens and stimulate healthy biological activity. And it's worth saying that you don't have to make your own vinegar to use vinegar in your garden. You can totally just buy it from the store. You just don't want to use the commercial grade vinegar because the acidity is going to be too strong and it's not going to have the balanced nutritional components and live cultures of a high quality raw vinegar. Something like Bragg's or the Kirkland Signature brand works great. So you can use vinegar on the soil as a part of a soil drench. You can use it as a part of your foliar spray applications, and you can use it as a part of your seed soak solutions when you're starting seeds or getting your bare root plants off to the races. A simple soak in some heavily diluted vinegar along with some fermented plant juice, oriental herbal nutrient, and lactic acid bacteria is a great way to up germination rates for your seeds and give them the chance to start off on a healthy foot without potential pathogens interfering. You can check out our video on our seed soak solution if you want to learn more about that. Vinegar is also used in other Korean natural farming recipes like making water-soluble calcium acetate and phosphate. It draws out minerals from eggshells, oyster shells, and animal bones. And beyond strictly garden uses, vinegar, especially high quality homemade stuff, is a great natural cleaner. It's not a harsh chemical, so it's super safe to use for cleaning counters, tables, and other surfaces. It's great for cleaning garden tools like snips and loppers. And of course, you can use it to cook with. And a little pro tip here, if you do want to primarily cook with your homemade vinegar, I suggest starting the secondary fermentation process a little bit sooner than you might otherwise. Let a little bit more of the residual sugars remain before converting it all into alcohol, and then backslop and aerate your slightly sweeter vinegar in a vinegar from there. And that's just going to give you more of a sweetness to balance out the tart. Great for pickling things or balancing out a rich dish. And vinegar lasts forever when you keep it out of direct sunlight. So that's where we're going to conclude this video. Remember to grab the recipe and check out the Natural Gardening group. I would love to connect with any and all of you, especially if you are looking for some more customized guidance. Feel free to send me an email too. If you have any questions, you can send them to Taylor@the Griffin Family Farm. If you want to learn how to use your vinegar for a seed soak solution, you'll want to check out this video next. And otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.